What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Kick-Ass Podcast. We are back here today to take a look at an interview that MJF did with Justin Barrasso over at SportsIllustrated.com. So shout out to him and them for the interview, the transcription, everything like that. Like I said, we're going to get into that here in a second, but I wanted to just reference the little bit of Dynamite that I did see last night. I saw pretty much, I would say, close to the majority, maybe half of it. Just like weird portions. I was trying to catch up on some things last night, cook some dinner, all that good stuff. Um, but I will say I love the way it started. I like having MJF come out strong. I love having him touch on the main key players, right? Your heavyweight champion, Will Ospreay. You have him talking about just a little bit of the state of AEW as a whole, but then he delved right into, well, he got interrupted. He kind of set up his next feud, right, with Roosh and everything like that. I liked how he called out the champ and he called out Swerve, but he's not directly going for Swerve yet. I like the kind of end game that we're going on, but it's one of those things where, and multiple people have said in the past, but it's one of those where if no one's talking about the champion and no one views it as important and that's not an end goal, then is the champion really important? You know what I mean? Where in other sports it's different, right? The end game is always going to be Super Bowl, right? You know what I mean? Like the NBA championship, the Stanley Cup, things like that. But with wrestling, you have to keep that at the forefront. And it's an understood yes, but it can get lost in the shuffle as well, especially when you have your big names and some of your talent that may be bigger than the business at some point, or setting their scene and making their case to pretty much be like a star without having to have a championship. You know what I mean? So I like that he mentioned Swerve, and I like that it's not a, oh, I can't talk about Swerve because I'm not in a program with him yet. I like that. That really stood out to me as very brief. But I like the follow up that we got later on from Swerve as well, right? So I like interacting and kind of threading, and we, like I said, we're not on this podcast obviously, but a few shows back, I was going into the lead for World's End, possibly, I believe. Yeah, it had to because MJF is still the champion. So they had a backstage segment where Swerve and MJF interacted. So I think that was the first seed being planted, and obviously we're gonna have a feud between them going forward. And I'm very curious to see when we get that, and to see how quickly we get that. Whether that turns into possibly a MJF title shot back at, what is it? Is it Forbidden Door? I believe at in Long Island, if I'm not mistaken. But I just part of me is like MJF is good without needing the title, but part of me is he's so valuable. It's almost like how can you not? But then on the flip side, you have Osprey now, who's taken AEW by storm. You have Okada, who's just pretty much just kind of like on the back burner, I would say. Not in a necessarily negative way, but he's just kind of waiting to be put on the front burner, go with the cooking analogy and really get things hot and get things going and get it cooking. He's just kind of simmering for now, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Like I've said before, I think I really like the role that he's taken, and I think it was smart in retrospect with him taking the hero role because you have MJF coming back as a babyface. You have Osprey like I said, taking over AEW essentially as their top guy, as their top face. And then you have Swerve as well. Swerve's popularity, yes, it may not be at the peak that it was, what, last year or so, maybe a year and a half ago, but probably not a year and a half, probably about a year or so ago, or building, right? I would say maybe when the build really began. But I think Swerve still has a lot of love too, and I'm not really pressed to take the title off of him. You know what I mean, or anything like that. We're not gonna get into predictions here yet, but I just wanted to touch on a few things from AEW Dynamite last night. I do like that Swerve is in the main event again. I don't still really agree with him needing to have a title match with Roderick. You know what I mean? It was what it was. Nothing too crazy to complain about. I'm still not on the uh on the train for the learning tree. I'm not there. I can appreciate it, you know what I mean? Excuse me. He's Chris Jericho. He's obviously not taking himself seriously, right? And that's the fun part. That's the whole point of it. But man, like he was, I don't know, like last night just really stood out to me, just the amount of TV time, which is, it's one of those things where it's like, and kudos to them too. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where if we sit here and quote complain about it or give constructive criticism or our opinions or our feedback, it's like, well, yeah, that's the point, and I get it. You know what I mean? But it's like it's still, I don't know. It's too cutesy for me. It's like, okay, like okay. This is, I don't know. To me, I'm gonna wait and see. Benefit of the doubt. I do like that the bounty hunter, he's getting more TV time, and he's definitely getting more airtime than he has in the past. And of course Big Bill, but I just, something is just rubbing me the wrong way with it. And I'll be happy to eat some crow here or whatever when it turns out to be a big hit or whatever. But I just, for some reason, it's just not clicking with me, and I'm trying, but just take a break, man. Just, there's nothing wrong with it. Just take a break, like go home for a few months and then come back in the fall and resume and go from there. But I don't know. But back to the main purpose of today's little show here, and that is the interview again, like I said, that MJF did with SportsIllustrated.com. Again, before we get into it, shout out to all involved, Justin Barrasso, Sports Illustrated. And thank you guys for checking out the show. I really appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at @kickashpodcast_. You can follow me personally at ASHMANNS, Ashmans. I had to throw the S on there because there was another Ashman, I think. Yeah, I know, there should only be one. But getting to the article, it starts off by, of course, MJF stating that he's back in here to save the day. I'm not going to read everything word for word, but just get to the main highlights here, because it is a substantial article. So again, props to them for their content. But it goes into just giving a little bit of backstory after him taking some time away from the December 30th pay-per-view World's End, and kind of fast forwarding to where he's at now. He says Daddy's back, Daddy's going to make a change, and Daddy's going to help the health of the company. So don't really like calling him Daddy personally, but whatever, I get it. The article says a living, breathing embodiment of controversy, Friedman stirred up considerable intrigue at Double or Nothing simply through his choice of clothing. The denim leather combo and ripped physique was certainly reminiscent of another fiery return promo, a defining moment of Triple H's career that took place at Madison Square Garden in 2002. And man, guys, I remember watching that as a kid and just even getting like excited and goosebumps then. Like I remember sitting on my couch and just thinking, holy shit, like holy shit, because Triple H left, he was a bad guy. He came back and he was completely revamped. So yeah, and not that MJF was hated right now, right? But because he had recently turned, but it was very similar. So obviously we were all leaning into that, and he confirmed it there. He says the jean jacket was over what I feel is my leather jacket, but that jean jacket was certainly an homage to a return that meant something to me when I was a kid in Madison Square Garden. I'm sure people can connect the dots. Outside of that, the video of me walking through one of my palatial estates in the most magical place on earth, Long Island, New York, looking at that trophy room, it allows people to remember all the moments I created in a very short period of time. The dog collar match, the epic promos with CM Punk, the Iron Man match with Bryan Danielson, the promo with William Regal, the Dynamite Diamond ring, and all the wins that came with that. Dinner debonair. Almost forgot about dinner debonair. My pipe bomb in LA, lashing and whipping my pipe bomb in LA, lashing and whipping Cody, kicking Cody in the dick after I threw in the towel and ruined an opportunity for him to become world champion in my promotion. Me putting Wardlow through the paces. I'm glad you mentioned Wardlow there. I still feel bad for Wardlow. This is just a fact. I've created some of the greatest moments in the history of the business, and I've only been on national television for an extraordinarily short period of time. I've said it before, I'll say it again because it's true. I'm 28 years old and I've already had a Hall of Fame career. There's no way you can compare or contrast me to. There's never been anyone like me before. I don't know about Hall of Fame, but like he's getting there, bro. When MJF marched into the ring, he faced off against Adam Cole, the man who masterminded the demise of his world title run. A former Triple H protege, Cole is a star in his own right. He talks about Cole's history there. In 2019, I can safely say Adam Cole was the best of the best, said Freeman. Point blank, he was the guy numero uno with any and all promotions. I can also say at the end of 2023, he was part of the top quarter hour of every weekly television until he broke his ankle in two places. That's it. You've got to give him his due. I refuse to say give the devil his due. I'm the devil. He's a cheap knockoff carbon copy, and he's also, I guess it's a pussy. Please put that in writing. They bleeped it out. I said it in my interview when I grabbed that stick. When I grabbed the stick. Grab that stick. When I grabbed the stick. It's not my fault everybody in comparison sucks a big old bag of donkey dick. No one is on my level. No one has ever been on my level. Sometimes I feel like I'm jaywalking because I'm moving so much faster while everyone else adheres to the stop signs and the yields. There is no stopping with me. And that's why I'm lapping everyone in the professional wrestling landscape. He ain't wrong about that part. I'm just going to see this picture really quick. All right. Continuing, MJF recently signed a lucrative long-term extension with AEW. He weighed out the option of working for WWE, which he shared was a very rare possibility. Of course there was, said Freeman. Am I not going... Oh, of course there was, said Freeman. Am I going to get into the weeds? No. At this point in time, the move made most sense for me. This move made most sense for me. God, I can't read today, guys. Sorry. I'm making a ton of fucking money. As far as when the contract ends, that's nobody's business but my own. And then they continue to discuss his popularity and that soared at the point where even chants at WWE shows were named or were had, and then notable during an appearance by Triple H at the Pat McAfee show, which took place during the ascent of Cody Rhodes to the main event in WrestleMania 40. Cody Rhodes is a mentor of mine, said Freeman. I fucking love the guy. I love the Rhodes coaster. But when Triple H is doing an interview on one of the biggest sports shows, whose name were they cheering in the background? My name. I'm not just one of the biggest stars in AEW. I'm one of the biggest stars in the fucking business. That's true. A point of emphasis during the return promo at Double or Nothing was highlighting how MJF is not a New Japan or WWE Vince McMahon made creation. That leaves him in a very rare space in professional wrestling. The reason that promo resonated with people is because everything that came out of my mouth was fact. It wasn't feelings, it was fact. Can you remember the last time someone became a household name in arenas and WWE were chanting their name when they have zero exposure elsewhere? We're talking the Crockett Cut era, aren't we? I take pride in that. AEW is my territory, but I'm a name in every territory because I made professional wrestling my bitch. MJF made MJF. Facts. And you know what's crazy? I'm still evolving. Nobody really knows me 100% ever, and nobody ever will. To coin a line from one of the greats, if there's one thing for sure about MJF, nothing's for sure. I almost look at my wrestling matches as a discography of sorts. Someone might say to you that the match between me and Jungle Boy at Double or Nothing in 2020 is one of the greatest matches they've ever seen. Wow. Somebody might say the greatest match they've ever seen or they ever saw was MJF versus Darby Allin at Full Gear, or that MJF versus Adam Cole at Wembley Stadium was the greatest spectacle they've ever seen, or MJF in the Iron Man match against Bryan Danielson, or MJF in the Four Pillars match, or MJF versus CM in the Dog Collar match, or MJF versus Cody Rhodes. The list goes on and on. What's so interesting about me to toot my own horn, toot toot, is because I'm so good at talking, people generally forget how great I am in the ring. Then they see me wrestle and say, holy shit, MJF is the best wrestler in the world. And I don't wrestle too often. That's why when I wrestle, it's can't miss. Which is true. And I will say I would be in the ball camp of having him wrestle a little bit more. Obviously it doesn't need to be weekly, but I would say like a Will Ospreay style, right? Maybe a little bit less. Since they are different characters in that regard. But man, like I think you need to get him in there and get him in there more. Maybe you want to save his initial return match. I just think, like, why not? Why not? So he continues to say, as he neared the end of his title run, particularly in December, he was compromised due to injury but refused missing obligations. As far as that Samoa Joe match goes, full transparency, my shoulder was so messed up I couldn't even do cardio. When I ran, my arms would swing slightly, and the pain that would cause was unbearable. But I got in the ring that night to do my job. Frankly, I find that interesting. A lot of people in my generation are pussies. Please print that. What's that word? Print it. They're too afraid to get in there, and when they have a boo-boo, they're too afraid to get in there when they have a boo-boo. That's not how I operate. I take my job very seriously. If you put MJF on the top of the billing, I'm showing up. And one more thing about that match. Joe's a tubby little bitch, and if we ever wrestle again, I'm going to bite his face off. I would give him credit. That night, he was the better man. He outsmarted me. He didn't out-wrestle me. He outsmarted me. And that's never happened in the history of my career. So kudos to him. He earned that world title. So that's cool. And then I'm just going to end it here after, well, that's it, obviously. Or not, obviously, not that you guys can see it here, but it's towards the end. But they state, an interesting debate following MJF's return at Double or Nothing whether the pay-per-view was the right form for it or if it should have been saved for a surprise moment on Dynamite. But it followed the pay-per-view culture of AEW CEO Tony Khan, which is to give paying customers more than their money's worth. based on the last minute by minute pay-per-view buys when we heard MJF was coming. Okay. It was just oddly worded. Based in MJF is quoting, he says, or quoting, speaking, he says, quote, based on the last minute pay-per-view buys, when people heard MJF is coming back, that gave people no choice but to buy the pay-per-view, so it was the right choice. And if you really want to see me on Dynamite, the good news is I'm going to talk tonight, and I have to get a lot off my chest. There was a lot of shit I watched on my TV while I was out for all those months that really pissed me off, and I'll be talking about it on Dynamite. I didn't even scratch the surface on the pay-per-view. And then he just says everyone should be in line to kiss my ass. um, so yeah, I think it was a really interesting interview. Obviously nothing too juicy or groundbreaking or anything, but I like the line that he teeters, right? I like the fact that he's able to go back and forth, and the fact that he toes that line so finely. You know what I mean? He, you never really know who the real MJF is, right? And I think that him coming back and staying with AEW isn't a surprise to me. I feel like this deal was probably signed months ago, if not sometime last year. I think that him betting on himself and him pretty much taking AEW over as his company and wanting to be the face of it makes sense. Why wouldn't you? You know what I mean? He's almost like a big fish in a small pond type thing. Not to undervalue AEW or anything like that, but it's a sense where this star is growing and growing and growing, and he's just absorbing more and more spotlight and fame and recognition. Where it's like, oh my god, like AEW, just the brand isn't keeping up. Like if we're just comparing brands, the brand of MJF, I feel is almost growing faster than the brand of AEW. And granted, there's a case to be made where no one would even, and myself included, most likely would never even know about MJF or not know as much of him if it wasn't for an AEW. And I think that's true. And I think it can almost be compared to where and I think I even did earlier, when you compare, does the title make the man or does the man make the title? When you're first starting out, you both need each other, right? You need a brand to make the person, and then the person needs to make the brand as well. Whereas the title, if you're just starting out, yes, your heavyweight championship, that's going to be the end all be all. And that's going to have a layer of significance and respect and prestige, but you still need someone who holds that same, oh, I just went out, who holds that same it factor and that same credibility and that same prestige almost, or who's getting to that point to elevate it even more. So whereas, yeah, I'm on the way up, the title's on the way up, and the company is on the way up. So to me, I think it was a no-brainer, and that's kind of what I mean when I say like a big fish, small pond type thing. Not necessarily like speaking down or negatively about AEW, but it's almost like a fact. He's right. No one was chanting AEW. I was there. No one was chanting AEW during the Pat McAfee shows or anything during WrestleMania 40 weekend. They were chanting MJF's name, chanting his initials. So there's a lot to be said there, and that's why I state that AEW is the small pond and MJF is the big fish, rather. But that's not a bad thing. Like the fish is still in the pond. You know what I mean? Like it's the fish isn't leaving anytime soon. Just because the fish is big doesn't mean the pond sucks or anything like that. It just means the fish is just flourishing so well because of the pond. You know what I mean? I don't know why I'm getting so deep into it, but I just don't, because and putting this out there too. Like I don't want it to be taken like, oh, like he could be doing so much better. Yeah, obviously, because the spotlight is there in WWE. But I think he made a phenomenal decision. I'm sure he is making a fuck ton of money, as he should. And he is going to elevate AEW even more. And by the time his extension is up, whether it's 3 years from now, 5 years from now, if I had to guess, probably 3 years or so, he's gonna be what, 31? Still probably barely hitting the peak and the prime of his career, and then we can go on from there. But I love how he's not afraid to still mention Cody Rhodes. He's not afraid to still mention CM Punk, and he's not afraid to leave them in his history because they're still building blocks and they're still part of the MJF story. So that's why I think this article stood out to me so much. And I loved his return. I loved the walk through the palatial estate. It was something so simple but so well done. And I'm very excited to see where MJF slides in, because like I said earlier, Will Ospreay is very hot and popular in AEW. Swerve is still out there hitting it strong. So it's going to be a very interesting summer and fall time for AEW, and I'm very excited to see it. But with that being said, guys, thank you so much for checking out the show. I truly appreciate it. If you have any feedback or any comments or your take on anything, feel free to let me know either if you're watching it on YouTube or on Twitter at @KickAshPodcast_ or at ASHMANNS. Like I said, if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment. And I don't say this, but you can like and subscribe or whatever. To me, it's just kind of odd saying shit like that, but I get it. But again, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys for viewing, and I hope you have a great day. Enjoy wrestling and stay safe, guys.